mental health and compassion and understanding. Right, today, before I start, I wish to mention there's a trigger warning in the content of today's podcast. Today, I'm tackling a very, very difficult topic, that is suicidal ideation. As it's September, this is the month that actually looks at what suicide ideation is and what suicidal intentions are. This is a challenging subject to discuss, and it's all too easy to avoid. But I feel it's necessary to open up about it. Make some practical tips on addressing this subject. Now, this subject can feel heavy and overwhelming, but by bringing it to light, we can make it much easier to understand and be less scary to approach. Be sure to listen to the end, where I will actually share a testimony of how I successfully helped somebody break away from the downward spiral and find a path to recovery. Suicidal ideation is not fleeting thoughts of wanting to die. It's often deeply rooted feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, of being trapped, of being a burden to others. Recognizing the signs is the first and most critical step. So what should we be looking for? When it comes to others, the signs show up in very different ways. They might start talking about wanting to die. They'll likely express immense guilt or shame. Oh no, I know this from personal experience, having had bouts of mental health issues myself throughout my. Now, the person with this ideation might say, I wish I was dead, or everyone will be better off without. This can often happen and can be quite distressing to hear. So looking out for people that are at risk of this behaviour. Change in behaviour is in fact a major red flag. Withdrawing from friends and social activities, giving away cherished possessions. It could even be deciding to make a will. A person might also start engaging in some risky behaviours like reckless driving or increased drugs or alcohol use. They might be experiencing some extreme mood swings. There may be a change in the sleep pattern or the eating pattern. Sometimes these behaviours can be very subtle. A few years ago, I phoned a close friend to share with him a new interest I'd found in conservation, knowing that was his keen interest too. At the time, he didn't sound himself. He was kind of making out he was interested in what I was saying, just being polite, but it didn't ring true somehow. I found it strange. Sadly, a few weeks later, I received a call telling me that he'd taken his life. So if you notice a sudden shift in behaviour of someone you know, especially if that behaviour is new and intensifying, it's a call to action. So now, what about when we experience these feelings ourselves? It can be insidious and overwhelming process. You might feel yourself feeling empty, hopeless, that you have no reason to live. You may find yourself preoccupied with thoughts of violence or death. You'll likely be experiencing deep emotional pain or physical pain. Now, these thoughts can wax and wane. One day they might be specific and intense, and another day they might be just a little bit more vague. It's crucial to remember that even passive thoughts, like wishing you wouldn't wake up, these are a serious warrant for help. Okay, so you've noticed the signs. Now what? The most common fear is that asking someone if they're suicidal will put the idea in their head. The truth is, supported by research, is actually the opposite. Asking somebody directly can actually be a huge relief because it shows that the person, because it shows that, because it shows the person that you're not afraid to talk about what they're truly feeling and that you care enough to ask. So how do you do it? First of all, find somewhere private and calm to talk. Start by expressing your concern without judgment. You could say something like this: I've been worried about you lately. I've noticed you've been a little bit more withdrawn. I want to be there for you. Are you having some thoughts of taking your own life? Crucially, once you've asked that question, listen. Just listen. Don't interrupt or try to fix the problem. You need to validate those feelings being expressed. You could say what you're feeling sounds incredibly painful. I don't have all the answers, but I am here to listen. Now, it's actually important to avoid phrases like this. You have so much to live for. Think of how it would affect your family or how it would affect me. Whilst those feelings may be true, they can make the person feel more like a burden and induce an awful lot of guilt. Instead, focus that you are there for them and that their feelings are valid. Don't make promises you can't keep, like promising to keep their thoughts a secret. It's worth mentioning to the person that anything they tell you is, I always used to use the word, if somebody says to me, is this confidential? I'd say to them, what it means is it's need to know. In other words, if somebody tells you something that is worrying that they're planning to take their life, then warn them that before you start getting into the conversation, that you'd be obligated to share that with other professionals. This is a dangerous situation and needs professional help. Be honest and say, I can't keep this a secret. I want to make sure that you get the help that you need to stay safe. Now, the good news is there are some well-known successful approaches to addressing suicidal ideation. Key element of this is known as lethal means reduction. This involves the removal of access to any dangerous objects. Perhaps that could be certain medications. This isn't about control. It's about creating a safe environment and a temporary barrier during a crisis. Various psychotherapies such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. These are highly effective. These therapies help people to identify and change negative thought patterns and develop better coping skills. And of course, medications also play a vital role in treating underlying mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. Ongoing support is also a critical factor in prevention. This could involve a regular follow up from a healthcare professional, but also significantly the support of strong network of friends and family and community is really important. When we look at who is most at risk, the data is sobering. While suicide affects all demographics, certain groups have higher rates. In many countries, middle-aged men are particularly at a disadvantage. Middle-aged men, particularly from disadvantaged backgrounds, they are a particularly high-risk group. Veterans and indigenous peoples also have disproportionately high rates. For young people, suicide is a leading cause of death. It's also known that LGBTQ people are at higher risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviours than their heterosexual peers. Supporting somebody through this can be extremely emotionally taxing. It's all too easy to take on their pain, and it can affect our own mental health. As a helper, it is absolutely vital that we prioritise our own mental health well-being. We can give ourselves permission to feel overwhelmed and to take breaks. So you don't have to be a superhero to be a helper. Make sure you find your own support system. A trusted friend or a therapist, even using a helpline can help you to debrief. Remember that as a helper, you are not necessarily a professional and you're not responsible for saving somebody. Your role is to connect those people with the resources that they need. Make sure you practice self-care. This could be going for a walk, listening to some music, simply taking a moment to breathe. There is the box breathing technique. Breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, and exhaling for 6 seconds. This is a powerful tool that can help you to calm your own nervous system in a moment of stress. And it'll also help you to make the correct decisions rather than going into panicky decisions. Understanding suicide ideation is a journey. It's not a destination. It's about recognizing the pain and approaching it with kindness and knowing that there is always a path to recovery. If you or someone you know is struggling, then please reach out. Remember, you are not alone. Now, I mentioned at the beginning this a personal testimony, and it's from my professional experience of working in the drugs and alcohol field. I just want to mention to you that I was confident in what I did this because I had over 20 years experience of working with people in this fashion, having had considerable training in counselling skills. This happened one day when I was on the drop-in desk. A young man came and asked for help. He was really tearful, and he told me directly that he was planning to jump off the harbour in order to take his own life by drowning. And believe me, he was serious about this. He said to me, "I've been to A&E, I've been to the doctors. All they did was just give me leaflets and sent me away." He said, "I don't want leaflets. I just want someone to listen to me and to try to understand." At this point, I removed the assessment forms and the pen that were, quite frankly, a bit of a barrier to myself and this young man talking. I said to him, "Yes, I'm quite prepared to listen to him." He spoke for about 20 minutes or so. I didn't interrupt him. I just actively listened to him, acknowledging the points he was making with some non-verbal clues, which can be like nodding or some aha or ums. When he finished speaking, I simply paraphrased what he had told me and asked for some clarification over some certain points. Crucially, I was asking him if I had understood him correctly. Once I'd done this, he became a little bit more relaxed. When I noticed him relax and had the opportunity to speak myself a bit more, I asked him a little bit about his life in general, about the things that had interested him, things that had interested him in his earlier life. He then began to tell me about his work life and his interests. At this point, his demeanour changed. His eyes lit up. He made more eye contact with me, and he looked more confident. I then fed that back to him. I told him that his demeanour had changed and that he looked more comfortable. I told him that I noticed that he spoke with interest and enthusiasm about his earlier life. He then smiled at me, thanked me for listening, and he told me that he felt much better. At this point, I then checked with him what his plans were for the rest of the day. He acknowledged that he no longer felt the desire to take his own life. There was no need for me to carry out a paperwork assessment. Collecting any statistics, quite frankly, was just unnecessary. The young man left, shook my hand, and he then returned a few days later. He came in specifically asking for me and thanked me for the help that I'd given to him, which was little more than simply listening carefully. It's an experience I've never forgotten. Now, very importantly for my own welfare, just after that conversation I'd had with the young man, I shared the encounter with one or two of my work colleagues. This is really important for professional supervision and for personal welfare. It's always good to get some feedback from fellow professionals. One of my work colleagues said to me, "I think you've likely saved that young man's life." Okay, so finally, where do you and the person you're helping find help? Well, for immediate crisis situations, if someone's in immediate danger, call the emergency services. In the UK, that is to call 999, and apparently in the US, that is to call or text 988. There are other crucial resources that can help. In the UK, there is the Samaritans. Call 116123. That's available 24/7. There is the Campaign Against Living Miserably, and this helpline specifically helps men. There's one called Papyrus, which is dedicated to the prevention of young suicide. In the US, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline offers support via phone, text, or chat. We can encourage people to visit the GP or a mental health professional who can then provide a professional diagnosis and treatment plan where necessary. And of course, there is crucially community support groups, peer support groups. They can often be found online or in person, and they can be a great way to connect with people who have also had similar experiences. It can help the person feel less alone. Thank you for listening. Take care and stay safe.